Isn't that great? I love it.
I thought you got your own.
No.
There's a 10-hour recording of the engine on the YouTube if you're interested.
Really?
Because people said they use it to fall asleep and stuff.
Did you get to see the pictures?
Well, if you can get catch the whatever the lesser variant of the Omicron and get over it like a cold in a few days, you might be better off.
Rather than answering Sunday, would you just summarize day 6 next week? And it's either part 6 or day 6. And the lesson will be done the
First time, yeah.
Yeah, the first time.
We might probably won't be here Sunday.
Okay, it's only about a minute till, but I don't see anybody else.
Either ask them and answer them or ask people. Or it's just spread it around so that we're all talking and interacting.
Just use a rest, just take it easy.
I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. And Faith, are we on now? Okay. What about this camera here? Where am I at anyway?
It's just a microphone.
Huh, here?
It's just a microphone up there.
Oh, okay. All right, well, thank you all for coming, and thank you, James, for giving me the time and the space over here to do this. And we're going to have an interactive discussion on the Titanic disaster. Excuse me. And we're going to go into factors affecting that contributed to the disaster, the human factors, as well as the natural forces, which aren't talked about too much, but that I discovered about the weather and things like that. So, let me give a little background. I got interested in the Titanic about a year ago, and I started studying it mainly because of a song that I heard that had some lyrics in it that I wanted to see whether they're true or not. So I, excuse me. So I started digging into it, and I read about 12 books, bunches of magazine articles, much of the British Board of Trade Recommissioner's Inquiry. There's a transcription on the Titanic Inquiry Project, TIP.gov. There's also a transcription of the Senate, excuse me, the U.S. Senate's inquiry. They made an inquiry like days after the accident. Everybody came to New York. And then next month they went back to England and had another one. So anyway, so I got interested in this and I read about it, and I found a lot of things that were interesting to me, and I thought I'd share them because they're so interesting. Mm-hmm. So what I'd like to do is I want to go through the incident, the disaster itself in reverse chronological order by the different events. But at first, I'd like to start out with a little bit of background. Let's do a little quiz on see what you all know about the Titanic. Who came up with the original idea to build Titanic? Anybody know? No. It was this man here, J. Bruce Ismay. Okay. And has anybody, have you heard of him before? He was on the ship. Okay. He was on the Titanic and he survived.
Wow.
He was the what was his name? Managing Director of White Star Lines. Hi. Okay, so I got this. White Star Line owned and operated the Titanic. And they were owned by the Oceanic Steam Navigation Company, which in turn was controlled by the International Navigation Company, which was owned by IMCO, the International Marine Mercantile Marine Company, which was started by J.P. Morgan. You remember the big banker financier. And Ismay, Mr. Ismay, was president of IMCO. So not only was he the managing director of White Star, he was the head honcho of everything, the big cheese, right? So, he was on the ship. So I mention that because I think he had some influence on the crew of the ship over how they would respond. Naturally, if you got the big boss on the ship, you're going to want to do whatever he wants, right? So we're going to get into that. Does anybody else? The Titanic was one of a class of ships. Anybody know what that was? Okay, it was called the Olympic class. Excuse me. The Olympic was the first ship built about a year before the Titanic. And I got a picture of the gravy boat. I've got all these pictures on the computer. Let me show you something here. All right. So about 1908, I think it was, maybe it was 06, Ismay got with Harland and Wolff, were the largest shipbuilding company in the world, situated in Belfast, Ireland. Okay, and let me see what I'm looking for. Structures. There. And so here's the one. Okay, so you can see, that's kind of hard to tell what you're looking at here, but so this is Harland and Wolff's graving docks. This used to be 3 dry docks, and they tore them down and they made them into 2 because they were so big, the ships. So this is the Olympic, you can barely see there, MPIC. This is a year more farther advanced than the Titanic. Now you can see that the inner structure of the Titanic, this shows the frames. These are like 110 foot U-channel steel frames they got going on there. I think there's a guy down here, you can see. There's a man right there. Can't even tell how huge these docks are, like 250 feet up high, the cranes. So anyway, the Olympic was finished a year before the Titanic. And there was a 3rd ship in the Olympic class. Anybody know what that was called? Okay. It was the Britannic. But the original name, this is a bonus quiz. You can play trivia and get this. If you get this right, you'll win. The original name of the Britannic was the Gigantic. The original 3 names of the Olympic class ships that Ismay conceived of was Olympic, Titanic, and Gigantic. Okay, and his plan in building these was not to build the fastest ships, but the largest, most luxurious ships afloat, like floating palaces. See, they were in competition with Cunard lines, with the Mauritania and the Lusitania. Those were the fastest ships at the time. And he wasn't trying to compete. in speed. He wanted to get the luxury crowd, the well-heeled, you know,
Right.
paying customers, right? So that was the whole idea of these. And he had a lot of money, and I'm telling you this because it figures later on. These were cost plus construction contracts for Harlan and Wolff. In other words, they could spend whatever they wanted on these ships. The sky was the limit. And we said they would pay for it, and they did. And so the ship, it cost £1 million, I think it was it $1.5 million? Cost $1.5 million, they were short for $1 million. Anyway, so that's the background on where the Titanic came from. If we look at the actual disaster, I thought it'd be easier, it would flow better if I start with at the end and move my way forward. Also, you start with the more somber stuff, then you go to the technical stuff, and then the more interesting scientific stuff. And finally, we get to the fun stuff. There's actually some fun stuff here, so believe it or not. So the last part of it was the rescue, but I'm not going to go into that too much because you probably know the Carpathia picked up all the survivors that were in the lifeboats. That was a success, so there's nothing really to talk about as far as a failure goes. But there was another ship in the area that could have picked them up, but didn't. Anybody ever hear that?
Yep.
Do you know what the name was? It was the Californian, and it was Captain Lord, and he lived the rest of his life. He couldn't live it down. He lived in ignominy, or how we pronounce it, because they blamed him for, he was only 5 miles away, and he didn't go pick up the passengers. While before the ship sank. All right, so, well, we're not in a position to talk about that yet, because I have to get all the way to the end to make sense of why he did what he did. So let's go to the next step. And if you have any questions, does anybody have any questions in their mind right now that they want to ask? Well, I'll write it down. Go ahead. Tell me what it is. I'll write it down. I'm not going to answer this second.
I just was wondering, and I think I know, but when I look at that vast construction right there, and I'm thinking, does that come from the centuries of Europe needing the ships and that kind of thing, as opposed to the United States not being quite up to the time, having the time to do all of that, or was it the lack of necessity?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that much about the European history and all the.
Because you always think about the
International
United
commerce.
States being ahead of everything, but this, my gosh, you know, to this
Well,
day, we're not.
Yeah, you're right. It was a huge undertaking in 1912.
Right,
Yep.
yeah.
Or, yeah. So, but remember, we had our own things too. J.P. Morgan,
Well, yeah,
his
but
thing
that's
was putting all these
investing
companies
over
together.
there instead of off the coast of the United States somewhere.
Yeah, no, you're
Just
right. I don't know. Why did Harlan and Wolff in Belfast, Ireland become the number one shipbuilder? I don't know. You'd think America, we're so used to America being number one
Right.
and everything, right? That's a good question. I really don't know the answer, but, so one of the, what I wanted to say was the Titanic disaster has been said to be probably one of the most studied such single event in the world history. Well, I don't know how you prove that, but it seems to be really popular. There's like hundreds of movies have been made all over the world, books and all that, magazines, like I was saying. And why do you think it's so popular? What is it about the Titanic? I mean, there's other shipwrecks that more people were lost, things like that, but.
It just seems to me that it appealed to all ages. Like I have a children's book. It's got an animal from the Titanic. And there just seems to be aspects that appeal to all ages. And maybe at the time when it was discovered was a time when the media and all of this could get out everything. And I remember going to exhibits, and it was just fascinating. So maybe it was the timing, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. It appeals to people of all ages and people with all different interests too. The history, romance, technology, you know, that kind of thing. So, so what was the worst part of the Titanic disaster? What made it so egregious, so outstandingly bad?
Well, if you've ever been on a cruise and they go through the lifeboat drill.
Okay. All right, you got it. You hit it on the nail. You hit the nail on the head. There were two major problems with the lifeboats. What was one problem?
There wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough, right. What was the second problem?
They probably didn't know how.
They couldn't get them loaded. All right. So, not enough and not loaded, right? So why, all right, now, oh, I forgot the most important thing, sorry. Okay, we have to talk about this one thing before I go any farther, because it'll help understand almost everything else that happens. All the other decisions, you'll say, oh, I know why they did that. So, what was the one characteristic about the Titanic, it was also true about the Olympic, that stood out that everybody said everybody had the same opinion, that the Titanic is
Unsinkable.
unsinkable. That's what they always said. We are unsinkable. And why do they keep saying that? Why did they claim that the ship was unsinkable?
Because of the construction.
It was built than the other ship.
Built for the best.
Yeah, well, it was really well built, yeah. The whole plating, they used 1 inch thick steel hull plates, 6 feet wide and 30 feet long. So they weigh like 4 tons apiece. And they were riveted on, they didn't have welding. And to make them fit, they had these machines that would jog the ends and make them a butt like that. And I always wondered how they sealed the seawater out. They didn't use they did tar or anything.
Crazy glue.
No, they had these machines like jackhammers, and they jackhammered the edge of the thing, so it split the steel and smash it up against the next piece.
Wow.
You can imagine that'd be hard. You'd be lucky if you had still had any hearing left after working on that. But anyway, what it was they had watertight bulkheads and watertight doors. Okay, so this is the reason. Watertight bulkheads and watertight doors, all right? If you remember that, if you just, whenever I ask you a question why, you'll just say, because they got watertight bulkheads and watertight doors.
What's a bulkhead, just to make sure?
Okay, I'm going to show you. There's a picture over there, but I got all these pictures on the computer.
Oh, wow.
And so I can bring them up there on the big screen. So this is under ship diagram plans, I think it is. Is it? I gotta. Wait a minute. Is that the one? No, that's not the one. Wait a minute. You bear with me a minute. Maybe I think it's on another. Should have these ship diagrams. There it is. The whole plate damage areas. Okay, this is it. Right here. What I wanted to show you. I gotta zoom up. All right, I searched for this for a long time. It took me months before I didn't even know what to look for. Okay. this, and I was watching a YouTube video, and some guy was talking about the Titanic, something or other. And on the back, on the wall behind him, there was this drawing was on there. I said, that's what I'm looking for. So, there's a copy of it there. There were actually 15 watertight bulkheads, you can imagine, but these red lines were the watertight bulkheads. And they went all the way up and down the ship, okay, across the ship. All right, and they only went up to the E deck, okay? I said, well, why was that? I said, well, because it's kind of complicated, but here's the water line. If this bulkhead, if this compartment gets punctured, the water's only gonna go up to the water line, right? And so they don't have to worry about the water going up any higher than that. Even if they had 2 compartments, even if they had the first 4 compartments punctured, the ship would still float. But that's not what happened. See these green lines here? I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm talking about the red here. But anyway, we'll have to go over it later. In 1996, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute sent a bottom profiler. It's like a modern day, what do you call it, ultrasound. They see, even though Bob Ballard found the ship in 1986, the bow was buried under 50 feet of mud. So you couldn't see what the damage was, right? So in 1996, they sent this machine down and they took these shots. And what they found was, if you notice, these green lines, these go straight across. These are hull plate seams, okay? So the plates, the steel itself didn't break. What it was the rivets, okay, that popped. All right, and I was gonna do this later, but so I wondered for a long time, it says, how can ice bust through steel, you know? I mean, you think when steel meets ice, who's gonna win, right? Well, in this case, the ice won. The reason is, all right, I know this looks like a kitchen trash bag full of packing plastic, but this is actually a carefully crafted scale model of a 1,000,000-ton iceberg. All right, the iceberg that wrecked the Titanic. Now, I think it's probably a little bit more. It'll only be about 350. This is my Titanic ruler, measured in Titanic feet. See, it's over 1,000 feet long. And I apologize, my ship isn't done, but if it was, that would be too fragile to bring here. So anyway, you can see the Titanic itself is 882 feet long, which is what it is. And the iceberg was supposed to be about 350 feet across, which is a little bigger than that. And when so I made this model just so you can get an idea of the relative size.
Right.
And like I said, I'm getting ahead of myself, but according to all the witnesses, they think it was about 100 feet high. This is this might look like half a water jug. It's been smashed up and stuffed with trash bag, but this is actually a carefully crafted waterline model of the iceberg. Okay, so that's what was visible above the surface. Okay, so we're going to use that when we try to investigate what the the lookouts saw. All right, this is supposed to be about 100 feet high, which this is. So anyway, I have and this might look like, this is my raincoat. coat. Jonathan, you want to give me a hand? It's got a Omaha Steaks cooler stuffed inside. You might wonder what that's all about, but this is actually a carefully constructed scale model of the hull of the Titanic, whereas this raincoat represents the whole plane. There's a plate on top, plate on bottom, and they're joined together by Velcro, which you have to use your imagination. But they're 1-inch steel rivets, big as my thumb. Okay? So I want you, do you want to be the iceberg?
Yeah.
So, all right, so this, imagine this isn't the whole iceberg, but just a piece of it. And the Titanic goes by, you're going to have to, why don't you go against the wall? Stand, just hold that against the wall from that. Here comes the Titanic. And it runs into the iceberg like this, okay? See what happened? Just pop the rivets.
Pop the rivets.
And you said it had 1-inch steel rivets all the way down that
About every
middle
4
part
inches,
there?
yeah. They had
Oh my
3
God.
million, over 3 million rivets. It took to build the Titanic. And it took a long time for them to figure it. So they went down and got some of the rivets and they tested them. And they found that, all right, I'm getting ahead of myself again. These machines, these are hydraulic riveters, all right? And see, there's a man standing there. These are pretty big, there's a man there. Those are made to reach all the way down the 6-foot plate and rivet the steel rivets. But these were too big to fit in the curved sections of the ship, which were the bilge here and the bow here, which is exactly where the iceberg hit. So what, they couldn't use the hydraulic riveters, so they used iron rivets, not steel, because iron could be heated to a lower temperature, and they had to beat them with hammers, right? The trouble is, the iron, they tested some of the rivets, they found they had like 9% slag, which is a lot of slag for a rivet. And not only that, but it had a high brittle ductile temperature, which means that in cold water they would break more easily. And by the way, does anybody know what the temperature of the water was? What the Titanic said? Well, we know what it was because they measured the, they were required to measure the temperature every 2 hours. It was 28 degrees Fahrenheit when it sank. And they said, well, how could that be? Well, it was seawater, of course, and it could get it could get cold, a lot colder without freezing. And I wonder, so how could they even get that cold? I mean, the air wasn't that cold.
Well, the ice.
Yeah. Well, did you ever make ice cream in the machine? How do you make it? You get
With salt.
salt and ice. All right, you mix it together, what happens?
And the friction.
Whatever's in the can is going to freeze. The same thing with the seawater. So anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. But that's what sunk the Titanic. Okay, I think was the rivets. They said, well, if they use better rivets, I said, well, you know, we've been welding ships since the 1940s. Ships are still being sunk by icebergs. They're welded. Ice is a very unforgiving foe when you meet it in the cold ocean. You know, so. Anyway, we got away from the lifeboats. So there weren't enough lifeboats. The British Board of Trade authorized the Titanic to carry, I got it written down here, 2,000, hold on. Well, they had 2,207 people on the Titanic, including the crew, and there was enough lifeboats for 1,178. So So only half of them, all right? Why was that? The British Board of Trade said you only need to carry 16 lifeboats for any ship, any ship that over 10,000 tons needs to have 16 lifeboats. And and they didn't account for the fact that the Titanic was 46,000 tons, you know, many times more than that, and they were authorized to carry up to 3,000 passengers. And I thought, you know, that's really stupid. Why would they do that? Say they only had to have half as many lifeboats. Well, that wasn't stupid, really. They didn't think they needed them because of this. Watertight bulkheads and watertight doors. They believed that these ships wouldn't sink. Okay. In fact, they said that the ship itself would be a lifeboat if they ever hit an obstruction. The worst case scenario that the engineers could envision was something hitting right here between two compartments, right on the bulkhead, and flooding two compartments at once. But they never envisioned 6 compartments getting stricken at the same time. It was like impossible. And
Richard,
yeah,
were they capable of envisioning that at that time, to know the power, the strength that an iceberg would have without being able to go under the water to explore?
They had a well-developed engineering formulas for tonnage and momentum and force and foot-pounds and all that stuff, you know. And I don't think that they. Here's the thing. I wanted to simulate the actual wreck, you know, where the Titanic hit the iceberg. And I was going to come up with a way to do it, but I finally realized you can't do that with a model. Okay. Anybody that grew up with in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, you watch these old science fiction or monster movies. They always use models. That was before CG, right? And they always look hokey. They don't look great. They don't look real. Because, you know, they're too light and they bounce around and stuff. And they move too fast. Well, you can slow down the film, but you can't make them have more momentum. You can scale the size down, but you can't scale the kinetic energy down or the momentum. I figured if I wanted to simulate the wreck with this model and this iceberg, this would have to weigh 14,000 pounds, and this would have to weigh 700 pounds and be made out of aluminum foil. Now, how can you make something out of aluminum foil and make it weigh 700 pounds at this size? You just can't. You can't do it. You know, so, and that's what makes this wreck so unusual. So it's so unlikely. Okay, you know, this is not like a Volkswagen bouncing off a Jersey barrier, you know, on the freeway. Or if you ever bring your John boat into the dock and you hit the pier, what happens? It just bounces and stuff. Well, ships don't do that. Big ships, they don't bounce. Okay, they just keep going. Yeah, go check out YouTube sometime and type in ship accidents, and you'll see these big ships right into the docks, and they just keep going. They don't slow down. They don't bounce off. They just keep going and ripping open the side of the thing, and that's kind of what happened with this. Okay. So that's why they thought it was so unlikely, because for this ship, it hit at exactly the right angle, and I mean exactly down to the degree, to go down this side. See, they figured they could have hit head on and the ship wouldn't sink. Because this was a collision zone. There was a crumple zone, like a Volvo, you know? The first 100 feet was built to crumple. And by the way, they put the firemen and the third class men passengers up here in the compartments. That's the lowest paid people, and the lowest paying people were right up here in the crumple zone. They would be the ones who would be killed if they didn't. Anyway, it's just so unusual for that angle, even head on, like I said, would not destroy the boat. Coming at a corner like this would have just done what they said. Well, it'll just put a hole in the side, you know. It will just go on our way, we'll limp along, but it'll still float. But they never envisioned 6 compartments flooding. And that's what doomed the boat.
What about the speed of the boat? Like in the movie, they said, they wanted to get there a day early. Would going at a faster
Okay.
pace, would that have something?
No, that's a good question. There's a lot of questions. Why did they go so fast? 24, it was 24 and a half knots, which is, wait a minute, no. 21 and a half knots, which is 24 3/4 miles an hour and 35 feet per second. Anyway, they were going there full speed. Here's a problem with that. Why, that's one of my questions is, why didn't they slow down? Okay, we'll go to that part here. There's a number of reasons for that too. Well, I didn't get to all the reasons why they didn't have all the lifeboats, but that was Ismay. He was in competition with the liner, the other with French and German lines. I wanted to show you this. Where is it? I don't know if you can see this picture. It's on the computer, but the problem is where's the deck views? The deck, the first class passengers, the highest paying ones, they were the ones you had to please, all right? All right, so this is the Promenade Deck for the first class passengers, all right, see that? Now you notice there's all the lifeboats there and these are the lines to the funnels. It's kind of crowded. That's just one row of lifeboats. And there was a man that worked for Harlan and Wolff named, his name was, wait a minute, let me show you his name. His name was Alexander Carlisle, and he was one of the designers. Wait a minute, where'd it go? I think I just got rid of it. Principal characters. All right. Sorry about that. There were 2 main designers. This was, the man on the left was Thomas Andrews. You saw him on the movie. He was the one that came up with the watertight bulkheads and the watertight doors idea, okay? And he didn't, when he found, he was the one that discovered the ship was doomed, all right, because he went down below and he saw the water coming up to the E deck. He said, it's just gonna go, we're gonna go. An hour and a half, he told the captain. Carlisle here on the right, he was a Harlan and Wolff designer. He pleaded with them when they were designing this to put 48 lifeboats on the ship. And he went out of his way to get these special davits. What do you see here? These are called double acting quadrant davits. What that means is they can sling over. We have a picture somewhere, but you can put 3 lifeboats side by side and pick them up one at a time. Okay. And anyway, I don't know where there's a picture of that, but those were designed to do that, but they still only had one lifeboats. You can see along on that picture. And this here, if you look, this is the A deck below the boat deck. This is what they call the Promenade Deck for this first and the second class citizens. To me, that looks like a Greyhound bus depot or something. It's not very attractive because you can't see the sky, and you're looking out windows, look at the ocean. If you want to see the sky, you have to go up on the boat deck, but you're walking next to all these lifeboats here and the funnels on the other side. There's not a lot of room. If they put 3 rows of lifeboats, you'd be crawling around all over the lifeboats. And these guys, I'm not going on this ship anymore. I'm going to go with a Hamburg America or some French flag or something. So that's why they didn't want to put more lifeboats up there. Besides, we're unsinkable, right? We don't need them. So they kept saying that over and over again. Okay, why didn't, okay, so they hit the iceberg, they found out they were gonna sink. Thomas Andrews was the one that broke it to Captain Smith that he was gonna sink. All right, up until that point, everybody believed that the lifeboat, the Titanic was unsinkable. And at this point, Captain Smith had to make a grim decision because he knew that he only had enough lifeboats for half of the passengers on the ship. So half the people on board were going to die, okay, for sure. Now, it came out in the inquiry, they said, well, Captain Smith, he didn't call any, they never had any lifeboat drills. Well, they don't need them. They're unsinkable, you know. Well, they just went out when they first launched the ship in Belfast. They just put 2 boats down with 4 seamen in there. And they paddled around for half an hour, came back. They didn't fully load them. You were asking why they didn't want to fully load them. Most of the crew believed that these ships would only hold so many, they would not hold all the rated capacity safely, which was 65 people for the main lifeboats. Okay, they didn't believe they would hold because they had seen lifeboats collapse like this, full of people, or they would break on the falls, you know, going down. And the side of the ship, it was 70 feet up. I got a picture here somewhere. You think about it. You got. Okay, why didn't people? Why were the lifeboats half filled? Let me just go through the list. Lifeboat drills were neglected. The crew were unfamiliar with their stations and duties. And many of the balls were sticking as they lowered the boat. They had paint on the ropes, and they wouldn't go down. And then one end of the ship, the boat would go down, and people, they'd be afraid of dropping them out. Captain Smith never gave an order to evacuate the ship. They just went around and knocked on the door. You need to go put your life jacket on, go up. They didn't say they were sick. It's just a precaution. You'll be back by morning for breakfast. That's what they told them. That's what they believed. Because they believed that we're unsinkable, okay? So people didn't believe the ship was sinking, so they wouldn't get in. The ladies, women and children first. That was what the captain said. That was his way of doing. Well, of course, it's the chivalrous thing to do. It's convenient for him because they only had enough room for women and children. The men were just out of luck. Okay. All right, but the ladies didn't want to go out. It was like midnight, 32 degrees out, pitch dark. Okay, and they wanted to get into a little boat and go 70 feet down the side of the ship into the ice water. It's like, really? I got a nice warm stateroom here. I'm not leaving. You know, and that was their attitude. Excuse me. Even the officers that were loading the boats didn't believe the ship was going to sink. So they didn't see a need for filling the lifeboats. Or one of them, like told her, he said, well, you know what? We could fill them down below. I said, I don't like the lower boat that's full, but it's just
Right.
it's too hot, too scary. They could lose everybody. 70 people, just like that, drowned, killed. He said, well, we'll go down to the water, we'll open the gangway doors, and they'll come out a ladder and get on. Well, they couldn't do that. They couldn't organize it for one thing. Another thing is the ship was sinking, and those decks were going underwater, the doors. Those. Also, then when they finally realized, Lightoller, he was the second officer. These are all the same guy at different times of his life. This is him on the Titanic, okay? This was him later. He survived, and you might, if you remember, if you saw Dunkirk, he was the one that took his yacht and saved about 70 people from the Germans by carrying them over. That was a true story, but he didn't, once he realized the ship was gonna sink, he just said, let's just get the lifeboats down, because if the ship sank with lifeboats attached, it would be really bad then. It was bad enough, you know, for everybody. So that was another reason. They changed their tune after they realized it was sinking. And also, and there was another problem. Go ahead, yeah.
What lowered the
Well,
lifeboat?
That's a good question. You know what? I was wondering myself. You know, so you can see they got pulleys here. It took 2 men to lower a lifeboat, and they're just doing like hand over. There was no machine. These were like rope fall. You know, they call them falls. They're pulleys. You know, and they just lower them by hand. And I said, how do they? They must have a pretty good pulley system, because you get 65 people in it. It's like what, 7,000 pounds or something. 3.5 tons in there. That's a lot of weight to be lowered by hand. You know, it's like lowering your car. Station wagon, you know. Oh, by the way, if you think that they were kind of backwards technologically in 1912, they had a steam turbine. That's what this is, the casing for the low pressure. That drove the central propeller. I don't know if you saw it on the video. We still use these today. I worked in the nuclear industry. Every electric power plant in the country has one of these, and it looks almost exactly like that. This was 1912, okay? They were way ahead of their time, this stuff, really. So, anyway. Was it, somebody asked me a question, I didn't answer it.
No, I didn't.
Did somebody else have a question? Okay, so we went about, okay, the lifeboats. I think I went over the sinking part much already. Watertight doors, wreck. All right, the iceberg hit. I was curious to see what it sounded like, what it looked like. So I gathered a bunch of witnesses' remarks. Most people did not know the ship was hitting something. Like I said, the ship, it didn't react. With a smaller ship, you know, you hit something and you'll do one of these numbers, you know. What do we do? What happened? But the ship didn't do that. It just kept moving. If you were in that section, it could have compressed the plates. In fact, one person saw the wall rippling as the iceberg went by. And this is 1-inch steel plating that was moving, you know. One person said it sounded, the feeling it was, Lightoller, the officer said it was like a shuddering or a grinding, but very little shock. There was no shock to it at all. One lady said it sounded like we were running over 1,000 marbles. And that would make sense considering all the rivets popping open, see. All right. Another lady said it sounded like someone running their finger alongside the ship, which kind of was what it was like. Another lady said it sounded like a long piece of calico ripping. Whatever that sounds like. And one lady, this gives another clue to the damage. one lady said, she said, I felt a bump when she walked in the door, and another bump. And she walked in, and another bump. Bump, bump, bump. So here we got bump, 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 bump. See, so it kind of describes the actual wreck. People say, well, I think we went over to steel already. The hull plating was made of battleship grade Siemens Martin steel from Scotland. There's nothing wrong with it, with the hull plating. It's just the rivets that had a problem. All right, you probably heard about the, we didn't talk anything about the wireless. All right, so what do you know about the wireless on the ship? Anybody want to volunteer anything? What time is that? I can't see with the lights.
15 to
7:46.
Oh, we got plenty of time, okay. Do you know the story of the wireless signals, anybody? Okay, so 1912, we think we're cool here now in 2022. I mean, we've got people going up in rockets. It costs you $1 million, but you can go up in a rocket. Or you can spend a few hundred and fly in a jet plane across country. Or you can call somebody on your phone anywhere in the world, or watch TV or whatever. You watch satellite TV at home on a big screen TV. You go to the doctor, you get an MRI or sonogram, modern miracles of medicine, right? What did they have in 1912?
program.
The airplanes were made out of canvas and wire and wood, and the cars weren't much better. Oh, we got so much better technology than they have, right? So, well, but they had a Marconi wireless radio telegraph system on the ship. And so what? Well, that was their internet. They could send text messages back home to their relatives saying, "Oh, I'm having a good time. I'll meet you. We'll go have a drink at the bar when I get there." So these guys, most ships could only afford one wireless operator. Okay, Titanic had two. They were hired by Marconi. They were paid by Marconi so much a month. The Marconi wireless system. I always had the suspicion, I still believe, that they might have got paid by the telegram too. Commission somehow. I don't know how that worked, but they didn't tell the board that they did, but they sure acted like it, because here's the two wireless operators. Jack Phillips, he didn't survive. Harold Bride, he did survive. You can't see his face here. His feet are wrapped up because he fell in the water and his feet were frostbite. When he came up, there was a collapsible boat. See, I should have one picture here somewhere. Upside down. Thought I had a picture. Anyway, they got these collapsible lifeboats, and one of them was upside down, and the guys were standing on it upside down, and it was the water was up to their knees. The thing was still floating, but it was down under the water. 30 guys standing there for 4 hours until they got to the Carpathia. Okay. Anyway, so that's what happened to Bride. He got stuck under this boat that was upside down. He was under it. There was air in there, but he couldn't come out for a long time. He finally went out around and got out of the water, but messed up his feet. Anyway, Jack Phillips was on duty on the wireless when they hit the iceberg. Now they had been having iceberg warnings all day. They got two that they never sent to the bridge. One from the Masaba at 9:15. But he was too busy sending passenger Marconigrams to Cape Race. See, they can only go so many miles, like 600 miles, which is a long ways, but they were not in range for a day or so. Finally, they got close to Newfoundland. All right. They said, "Hey, we got Cape Race in Newfoundland." So they're sending these wireless messages like crazy. And then they get these messages. "I say, old boy, we're surrounded by icebergs." That's one of the things. And he was busy. He said, "Shut up." He said, "Shut up." He says, I'm working Cape Race." That's what he said. It's because this guy was only a few miles away. Phillips was trying to talk to a station that was on the land about 500 miles away. And here's this guy 5 or 10 miles away, blasting his headphones out. You know, so he told him to shut up. So he did. So he went to bed. Well, guess what? They had an iceberg, and they said, "Oh, we're sinking now." But the guy he was talking to turned off the wireless and went to bed. This was the guy in the California. All right. So Clyde Evans was the name of the operator. So, but in all fairness, his shift was over, and he was the only operator. He wasn't going to work 24 hours. They were like on 12-hour shifts. I said, okay, that's enough. But the guy in the Carpathia heard them, and he was 58 miles away. They're still like 3 hours away. He was getting ready for bed. You know, it was 11:30, 40. And he had his pajamas on, and he had one headphone on his head. He was sitting in the bed. He was getting ready to take the headphones off, and he heard the Titanic wireless. And he alerted the captain. They turned around and they saved them all. If it wasn't for that one message, there would be no survivors. I don't think. Maybe some other ship could have caught him in a few days or so. I don't know. But the Olympic, I think, was on the way, but they were like way far away. Anyway, it was a tragedy. What happened with the wireless? They got messages, icebergs in the area. Okay, but half the time they didn't send them to the bridge. And even when they did, Captain Smith, they all ignored them. Because of what?
Unsinkable.
We're unsinkable. Right?
I have a question,
Yeah.
and I may be up ahead of myself though. But did the ship break in two
Oh, yeah.
when it went down?
They couldn't prove that until Ballard found it.
Until they found it.
Because Lightoller told him, he said, "There's no way it broke in half." He says, "I know, I was there." In fact, his rescue was probably the most remarkable rescue of the whole thing. He was on the bridge, took to the very end, and here's the bridge here. Okay, that's where the captain and all that. Up here, you can see the first funnel. You see this here. This is an intake to the blower that blows cool air into the boiler rooms and stuff. Right? So that's a big, what they call a fiddly grating. It's F-I-D-L-E-Y. It's named after the guy that invented it. And the bow took a plunge, and the water washed him up against this fiddly grating here, and stuck him there like a fly in a spider web. And so this water is like pouring down, and he can't breathe. He's underwater, you know. And the water, tons of water pouring down, all the way down the vent into the boiler rooms. Well, guess what? The boilers, they don't have any steam in them because they let the steam out. But you still got 1,000 tons of red hot steel down there. And you got ice cold water that comes in it. So what happens? It flashes into steam. So what happened was, after a minute, he was about to pass out because he couldn't breathe. The water was pulling. All of a sudden, this hot air blows him out away from the grill. And he lands in the water right next to collapsible B, I think it was, right? The same one that McBride was stuck in. And or Harold Bride, and he climbed up on that, and he was rescued. by the Carpathia, but he got everybody to stand up back to back like this, because they were underwater on an upside down boat. It's really weird. It would make a story in itself. Anyway, I think there's so many, you could spend a whole lifetime studying this, because there were 700 survivors. Everyone has a different story, you know, and there's so many things that went on here. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to cover everything. But the big thing was the lookouts. Why did they hit the iceberg? Why didn't they see the iceberg in time? Okay, I mean, really. And that's a good question. Lee, where is he? Frederick, I'm sorry. Fleet and Lee were the two lookouts. Fleet was the one that reported the iceberg. And they were in the crow's nest. So I want to use the model here to show. So I really need like a card table or something. You know what? We can just move that
Use
table.
that.
Okay, move that table.
Move that this way.
Yeah,
You want it just in front of this one?
under the board. All right. Yeah. Okay, so, all right, so, I don't need the lights on for this. All right, so, there's a lot of discussion about how long did they have between the time that Frederick Fleet saw the berg and reported it and the time they hit. And, well, we know that the ship was going 21 and a half knots, or 24 miles an hour, or 35 feet a second. We know it was anywhere between 37 seconds from the time they spotted to the time they hit. Okay. And we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, let's say it was 37 seconds. At 35 feet a second, that's about 1,250 feet or so that they would traverse in that time. Probably less. All right, so the ship was 882 feet. If we put the iceberg, let's put the iceberg 1,200 feet. So here's 1,000. 200. All right. It's not very far away. Okay, you can see that with your eyes here. I mean, and the thing's moving 35 feet a second. Count to 3 and go 100. 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, 1,001. So it's moving like this, which doesn't seem very fast, but it said it took the Titanic a mile to a mile and a half to stop. Because remember, it's 50,000 tons just floating in the water. It's not going to stop on a dime.
And the biggest part of the iceberg is below the water, you can't even see that, so.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the real iceberg here, right? And anyway, so my point is that how in the world can you miss it when it's that close? All right, well, I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna read. Hey, Josh.
How are you, Richard?
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Hey, we're gonna simulate what the crew saw. All right, I mean the lookouts. I mean, I think I am. Let's see. All right. I gotta turn the TV off. Okay,
Do you want the lights on?
The lights, I can.
yes, please. Oh, come on, so that one too. Oh, this thing goes to shit. You gotta make it dark. All right, so it's dark. Is that door, someone shut the door? All right, so, it's kind of hard to, okay, you can kill the light there. That's pretty dark. It's not, that's probably more like what it was like, but, the problem is, it's pitch black, no waves, no nothing. And I can't even see what if you, I took some pictures and I'll show you in a minute, but you can see if you get down to the level of the ship, you'll be able to see the iceberg outlined here. But because of the cold weather, they had what's called a Superior Mirage, which actually lifted the horizon up and made it so they couldn't see. Okay. Okay, Josh, can you get the lights back on? Yeah. For me? I have to actually show you this. It's hard to imagine what I'm saying here, but let me explain it just real quick. Then we'll go look at some icebergs. So, Mirage. All right, so this is, everybody's seen one of these, I think, right? So you see this on a hot sunny day, summer day, and what it is this is actually, you can kind of see, the telephone poles here reflected. So what that is that's the sky that's being reflected down. So it's called an inferior mirage because what's up is now down, okay? And the way that happens is this here, something that's up above looks like it's down because the hot air bends the light rays and makes it look like it's down even though it's up, okay, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to grip that. All right, here's a superior mirage. It's just the opposite. This is when the cold air, instead of the hot air, like the Titanic had cold air near the surface, and it bent down, which brings the horizon up. Here, the horizon really goes down like this, but with a superior mirage, it goes up, and that's exactly what happened with the Titanic. It didn't do anything to the iceberg. What it did was it lifted the horizon so you couldn't see it again. All right, let me show you. I went and did at the house. Here, by the way, here's a superior mirage. It kind of gives you an idea. So here's a pole, a telephone pole in the front. And if it was nighttime, you wouldn't be able to see this. But in daytime, you can. But if the mirage wasn't there, you could see it because it's being blacked from behind, see? And so let me show you the pictures that I took. So I went and, it's kind of hard to see even this. Let me zoom in. So that's with, I don't know if you can see, here's the box on the left, which is where the projector is. But right here is the iceberg, just below the moon. if, after you raise the horizon, it's gone, see? The iceberg is gone, right? See that? And this is what it looked like to them. They weren't looking for an iceberg, they were looking for a black hole in the sky. That's what they were looking for. You gotta understand, and not only that, but see, normally the lookouts, not only that, but by the way, they were 100 feet above the water. They said they would have seen better if they were down on the water. Okay? Being up so high, it made the light waves go off, so they couldn't see it at all, hardly, till it was right up on them. It's right up on them. You know, if you saw, you know, I mean, you can't get much closer. It's a length and a half from the ship. So.
Were they just looking with just,
They didn't have binoculars.
okay.
Well, let's ignore the question. Why? That's another thing I said. Well, that's stupid. You should have given binoculars. Well, no, like they interviewed the captains. They said, it's not their job to identify anything. You ever try to use binoculars at night? You don't know what you're looking at. You know what I mean? Because for one thing, it makes it dimmer. And also, it makes it narrow field of view, so I'm not sure what it is. The officers didn't want to lose any time telling these guys to be looking at them. They're supposed to sing out if they see anything, ring the bell, the officer will look. Like Lightoller said, he says, it's not like I'm sitting in the bridge, sitting down having a cigarette. So I'm looking too, you know. So anyway, no, the binoculars. They didn't want them to have binoculars, not because they weren't lost or anything like that. Lookout Hogg asked for his name was I can't remember his first name, but it was Hogg was his last name. He asked 6 or 7 times for the binoculars. They wouldn't give it to him. And I thought at first it was because Lightoller, he said, well, what did they? Well, they had the name C.H. Lightoller stamped on the side. I said, well, these are Lightoller's binoculars. You're responsible for them. But he had them. The lookout had them when they left Belfast and when they got to Southampton. But he didn't have them after that. Southampton is where they picked up all the rest of the crew, firemen, the third-class passengers, and everybody else. So I thought maybe he didn't want the binoculars laying around with a bunch of light-fingered Louis walking around the ship. You know what I mean? So I don't know. We'll never know, because that's where all the third-class people came in, you know, and then the stokers and the trimmers and the guys that held the coal, you know. Anyway, no, they didn't. But after that, they gave them binoculars. Also, they didn't have searchlights. The military ships, they all had searchlights. Not the commercial ships. Oh, it'll blind the other crew if you shine it on them. Okay, but you're missing icebergs and rocks and stuff with this, you know? You know, it's kind of crazy. They changed that too. They gave them all searchlights after this. And they made them get lifeboats too. So anyway, I'd kind of like to talk, I also wondered, where did the icebergs come from? Do you ever wonder where the iceberg came? You want to see where the icebergs came from? Let's go, take a look. So I found out, where's that diagram? There's a diagram on the wall over here. That the most likely place the iceberg came from was this particular glacier in Greenland. It's the one with a really long line. That means it has more, it moves more miles a year than any of the other icebergs. So, I don't know if you've used Google Earth before. Anybody use Google Earth? Well, let's try it. Let's go to Google Earth and we're gonna take a trip to the the land of ice. I should have called this up before while I was talking. Where is it?
What kind of ship was the Carpathian?
It was a passenger liner, but it wasn't as big.
Okay,
That was the one that just had one funnel.
because it didn't have searchlights, right?
No.
Just wondering how they saw those people.
Well, it's funny, you can read, there, like I said, there's whole, you can spend a whole lifetime studying this.
Right.
Rostrum, I forgot to tell you, they were, if the Titanic had not hit this iceberg, okay, if it had missed it and kept going, you know what was in store for it?
Yeah, sure.
There was an ice field 5 miles wide, solid ice, and 26 miles long, and this ship was stuck in it. And they would have just run right into that. Now, who knows how much damage it would have been done. All right, so I wish I had my mouse. Is this-
But prior to this, they had no previous experience or expectation that it was going to be there, is that right?
And that shows their ignorance.
What?
Because of all the study that had been done, they should have
Oh.
studied that.
Oh, I forgot. Oh, the other thing I forgot to tell you is another reason why they didn't see the iceberg. It was unusually calm. They said the oil. That's why I got that fabric. They said it was like oil, the sea. It was like being on a lake. They said on a picnic on the lake. It was totally smooth. Okay, like oil. They said. And that's one of the ways that they see icebergs in the dark, is because the waves crash against the base of the iceberg, and they can see them and they can hear them, but there was no waves, so they couldn't see anything. See, this was another thing against them. So they had the mirage effect that was against them. They had the calm that was against them. The darkness, there was no moon, just starlight, was not enough to illuminate the ice. So here we are in Greenland. So if you want to find, I really wish I had my mouse. Oops, I'm hitting the wrong button, because you can do it a lot easier. All right. So people that know about icebergs know that this is probably where it came from. So you go to Greenland and you look for this big island that looks like a big belly button on the left side. That's Disco Island, okay? And right below it, you'll see a big long white thing. That's Ilulissat Glacier, otherwise known to the Inuit as Sermek Kujalek, okay? It used to be called the Jakobshavn Glacier, named by the Danish, but they're going back now to the native names for everything, you know? So this is, you have to learn how to speak Greenlandic rather than Danish. That's all. Greenland, here's the funny thing. I love maps. I've always been interested in maps. I used to look at maps when I was a kid. I never knew anything about Greenland, except it was the largest island in the world and the capital was Godthaab. That was it. That's all I knew about Greenland. Well, guess what? They changed the name from Godthaab to Nuuk back in 1971. Okay, that shows you how little I paid attention to it. For 50 years I haven't paid any attention to Greenland. Well, now I am, and it's quite interesting. So if you look, here's the bay, and I want to show you. All right, I really do wish I had. All right, so here's this glacier that's coughing out these icebergs. You can see them. Let me zoom in a bit. All right, so 2,000 feet. So the Titanic's probably about this size here. So look at all the icebergs that are just coming out here at this one time. All right, and we don't have to look at it from the air. We can go to the ground and look at it too. Oops, I think I stopped it from doing what it's supposed to be doing here. Let's go see what this ice pack looks like from the ground. Bam, oops. I gotta turn around. All right, so that's what they call sea ice, all right? So you can see it's got a bunch of field ice, flat parts. What the mariners back then called growlers, which are medium-sized bergs, that make this sound, this weird sound, as the ice melts, the bubbles are coming up. But it's not just bubbles. The bubbles are under pressure, like 4 or 5 atmospheres of pressure, because the glaciers compress the bubbles, you know, and they freeze. And then when they come out of the iceberg in the water, they kind of pop. But when you got millions of bubbles coming up, they make like a growling sound. So the sailors call them growlers. So they've got sea ice, they've got growlers, and then they got the bergs, and the bergs are the bigger ones here. So what I'd like to do is to take just like a 10-minute video. Let me go back to my thing here. And on the iceberg. So let me go load that real quick. All right. There it is. Cool. Oh, you gotta wade through the commercials. Okay, here we are. So I'm gonna turn those central lights off. In fact, most of them. There we go. This. Bowhead whales, does anybody know? That's what I think of. That's gorgeous. April 14th, 2012. They had to take the southern route from January to August because of the ice. That was a long time. This berg here, I was gonna say, some of these icebergs are blue, okay, and I didn't get to that on this. One of the guys said the iceberg was blue, okay. And they asked, I want to go through, excuse me, real quick. What did it look like? One lady said it looked like a gray building going by the porthole. One of the officers said it just looked like ordinary ice, you know, white. The other one said blue with a white fringe on top. Kind of like this one. Lee, who was the lookout on the time, he's the one that said, he said it was black in the front and white in the back. I said, well, they didn't have any lights in the front of the ship, so it would be black. But they had lights in the back of the ship. So when it went by, it would be lit up. So he wasn't using imagination. Officer Boxall said it looked like a growler. Low and long, but it was too big to be a growler. Growlers are not big icebergs, they're just little things. So it reminds me of a story I heard when I was a kid. East India story about the blind men and the elephant. Anybody ever hear that? Blind men and the elephant? They took a bunch of blind men into town in India because they wanted to show them elephants, which they'd heard of, but they'd never experienced them before. So they took them into town and let them get around this elephant and feel. And they were blind, so they had to feel with their hands. And one of them got up against the side. He said, "Oh, an elephant is like a wall, you know." And the guy in the back grabbed the tail. He says, "No, the elephant's like a rope." And another one was sitting down grabbing his leg. He says, no, it's like a tree trunk. And the one in front grabbed his trunk. He says, no, an elephant's like a snake. It's like, well, who was right and who was wrong? I said, well, they all had a little picture of the thing, but none of them had a big picture. And that's the way it was, I think, with the iceberg. Nobody really had a big picture. We don't know what it looked like. But I was theorizing it might be some of this ice. The clear ice, you know, if you ever played on an ice pond when you're a kid, you fall on the clear ice, it's hard, it hurts. You know what I mean? White ice can give because it's got the bubbles in it. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up. So I think the iceberg was blue ice, but we'll see. Well, this one here. This is, I call this the Swiss Army iceberg. The reason I call it, can you imagine being in your John boat and you go by one of those jagged things? See, it's kind of like one of this is what it reminds me of. So is it, see the resemblance? Yeah. Anyway, I just thought it was funny. But I'll let you watch the rest of it without interruption. I had to use drones to film this. You can see how it as it melts, as it tips out of the water and melts differentially like that. I've never seen anything so artistically beautiful in nature like that, you know what I mean? Every one of those has a different shape, every one of them. Triple arch. It just melted that way. at how it's got the stripes going across there, where like it broke and it filled with water and it froze. So I saw this picture. This is not in there, but I saw this. Look at that. That's gorgeous. I mean, that looks like a bowl of my wife's that I broke one time. It's worth a lot of money, you know. But that's gorgeous.
Yeah, it looks like that.
Cole, he's my miracle child.
That's it.
So how does your miracle child get cancer?
Anyway, unless anybody has any questions, that's all. I didn't want to keep you past 8:30, so thanks you all for coming and
Thank you,
God
Richard.
bless.
Appreciate it. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Drive
great.
careful on your way back, and I hope you learned something. And
Yeah.
You
And,
saved the best part for last.
yeah, that's
The
cool.
iceberg. Yeah,
No, that's really cool.
that's just God's handiwork there.